Hello, everyone. We're going to be finishing chapter 16 today. So this is the audio recording for pages 229 to 236. Remember, on Friday, we read the first part of the chapter where Trevor got arrested. Pretty much a cop was profiling him. He was taken to jail. And the way the South African jail is, if you don't have someone to pay your bail, then you're essentially in with prisoners, people that have raped and murdered, all the way up to traffic violators. So there's not really a holding place to separate the felonies from the misdemeanors. All right, so we are at the second half of the paragraph on 229. The guard's given me a mat and a scratchy blanket. I rolled them out of the concrete floor and tried to get comfortable. Every bad prison movie I'd ever seen was racing through my head. But this wasn't prison. It was jail, and there's a big difference, as I would soon come to understand. I woke up the next morning with that fleeting sensation where you think something has all been a dream. Then I looked around and remembered that it wasn't. Breakfast came, and I settled in to wait. A day in jail is mostly silence, punctuated by passing guards shouting profanities at you, doing roll call. Instead, the holding cell, nobody says anything. Because everyone is afraid. No one wants to appear vulnerable. And I didn't want anyone to know that I was just a kid in for a traffic charge. So I reached in my mind for all the stereotypes of what I imagine people act like in prison, and I tried to act like that. In South Africa, everyone knows that colored gangsters are the most ruthless, the most savage. It's a stereotype that's fed to you your whole life. The most notorious colored gangs are in the number gangs, the 26, 27s, and 28. They control the prisons. They're known for being brutally violent, like Mexican drug cartels. A lot of these gangs even have the same look as Mexican gangs. All the Converse All-Stars with the Dickies pants and the shirt buttoned only at the top. By the time I was a teenager, anytime I was profiled by cops or security guards, it usually wasn't because I was black, but because I looked colored. I went to a club once with my cousin and his friend. The bouncer searched Mungsley, waved him in. He searched our friend, waved him in. Then he searched me and got up in my face. Where's your knife? I don't have a knife. I know you have a knife somewhere. Where is it? He searched and finally gave up and let me in, looking me over like I was trouble. I figured that if I was in jail, people were going to assume that I was the kind of colored person who ends up in jail, a violent criminal. So I played the stereotype. Anytime the cops asked me questions, I answered in broken Afrikaans with a thick colored accent. This was my brilliant plan to survive incarceration. And it worked. The guys in the cell with me were there for drunk driving, domestic abuse, petty theft. They had no idea what real colored gangsters were like. Everyone left me alone. The day of my hearing came. I was handcuffed and put in the back of a police van and driven to the courthouse to meet my fate. In South African courts, to minimize your exposure and your opportunities for escape, the holding cell where you await your hearing is a massive pen below the courtroom. You walk up the set of stairs into the dock rather than being escorted through the corridors. In the holding cell, you're mixed in with people who have been in prison awaiting trial for weeks or months. It's a weird mix, everything from white-collar criminals to guys picked up on traffic stops to real hardcore criminals covered with prison tattoos. It's like the cantina scene in Star Wars, where the band is playing music and Han Solo's in the corner, and all the bad guys and bounty hunters from all over the universe are hanging out. A wretched hive of scum and villainy, only there's no music and there's no Han Solo. I was with these people for only a brief window of time, but in that moment I saw the difference between prison and jail. I saw the difference between criminals and people who've committed crimes. I saw the hardness in people's faces. I thought back on how naive I'd been just hours before, thinking jail wasn't so bad and I could handle it. I was now truly afraid of what might happen to me. I looked around the holding cell. There were easily 100 guys in there, all spread out and huddled into their clearly and unmistakably defined racial groups. A whole bunch of black people in one corner, the colored men in a different corner, a couple of Indians off by themselves, and a handful of white guys off to one side. The guys who'd been in with me in the police station, the second we walked in, they instinctively automatically walked off to join the groups they belonged to. I froze. I didn't know where to go. I looked over at the colored corner. I was staring at the most notorious, most violent prison gang in South Africa. I looked like them, but I wasn't them. I couldn't go over there doing my fake gangster act and have them discovered I was a fraud. That game was over. The last thing I needed was colored gangsters up against me. What if I went to the black corner? I know that I'm black and I identify as black, but I'm not a black person on the face of it. So would the black guys understand why I was walking over? And what kind of mayhem would I start by going there? Because going to the black corner as a perceived color person might anger the colored gangs even more than going over to the colored corner as a fake colored person. Because that's what happened to me my entire life. Colored people would see me hanging out with blacks and they'd confront me, want to fight me. I saw myself starting a race war in the holding cell. All of this was happening in my head in an instant, on the fly. I was doing crazy calculations, looking at people, scanning the room, assessing the variables. If I go here, then this. If I go there, then that. My whole life was flashing before me. The playground at the school, the spaza shops in Soweto, the streets of Eden Park. Every time and every place I ever had to be a chameleon, navigate between groups, explain who I was. I'd never been more scared in my life, but I still had to pick because racism exists and you have to pick a side. You can say that you don't pick sides, but eventually life will force you to pick a side. That day, I picked white. They just didn't look like they could hurt me. It was a handful of average middle-aged white dudes. I walked over to them, we hung out for a while, chatted a bit. They were mostly in for white-collar crimes, money schemes, fraud, racketeering. They'd be useless if anyone came over to start trouble, but they weren't going to do anything to me. I was safe. Luckily, the time went by fairly quickly. I was in there for only an hour before I was called up to court, where a judge would either let me go or send me to prison to await trial. As I was leaving, one of the white guys reached out over to me. Make sure you don't come back down here, he said. Cry in front of the judge, do whatever you have to do. If you go up and get sent back here, your life will never be the same. Up in the courtroom, I found my lawyer waiting. My cousin Mussolini was there too, in the gallery, ready to post my bail if things went my way. The bailiff read my case number and the judge looked up at me. How are you? He said. I broke down. I'd been putting on this tough guy facade for nearly a week and I just couldn't do it anymore. I'm not fine, Your Honor. I'm not fine. He looks confused. What? I said, I'm not fine, sir. I'm really suffering. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked how I was. Who asked you? You just asked me. I didn't say, how are you? I said, who are you? Why would I waste my time asking, how are you? This is jail. I know everyone's suffering down there. If I asked everyone, how are you? We'd be here all day. I said, who are you? State your name for the record. Trevor Noah. Okay, now we can carry on. The whole courtroom was started laughing, so I then did too. But now I was even more petrified because I didn't want the judge to think I was laughing and not taking him seriously. It turned out I needn't have been worried. Everything that happened next only took a few minutes. My lawyer had talked to the prosecutor, and everything had been arranged beforehand. He presented my case. I had no priors. I wasn't dangerous. There were no objections from the opposing side. The judge assigned my trial date and set my bail, and I was free to go. I walked out of the court, and the light of day hit my face, and I said, sweet Jesus, I am never going back there again. It had only been a week in a cell that wasn't terribly uncomfortable, with food that wasn't half bad, but a week in jail is a long, long time. A week without shoelaces is a long, long time. A week with no clocks, no sun can feel like an eternity. The thought of anything worse, the thought of doing real time in prison, I couldn't even imagine. I drove with Mussolini to his place, took a shower, and slept there. Next day, he dropped me back at my mom's house. I strolled up the driveway, acting real casual. My plan was to say I'd been crashing with Mussolini for a few days. I walked into the house like nothing had happened. Hey, Mom, what's up? Mom didn't say anything, didn't ask me any questions. I was like, okay, cool, we're good. I stayed for most of the day. Later in the afternoon, we were sitting at the kitchen table talking. I was telling all these stories, going on about everything Mussolini had been up to that week, and I caught my mom giving me this look, slowly shaking her head. It was a different look than I'd ever seen her give before. She looked hurt. What? I said, what is it? She said, boy, who do you think paid your bail? Who do you think paid your lawyer? Do you think I'm an idiot? Do you think no one would tell me? The truth came spilling out. Of course she'd known. The car. It had been missing the whole time. I've been so wrapped up in dealing with jail and covering my tracks, I'd forgotten the proof of my crime was right there in the yard. The red Mazda missing from the driveway. And of course, when I called my friend, he'd asked his dad for money for the lawyer. The dad had pressed him on what the money was for, and being a parent himself, had called my mother immediately. She'd given my friend the money to pay the lawyer. He'd given my cousin the money to pay the bail. I'd spent the whole week in jail thinking I was so slick, but she'd known everything the whole time. I know you see me as some crazy old nag, she said, but you forget the reason I ride you so hard and give you so much grief is because I love you. Everything I've ever done, I've done from a place of love. If I don't punish you, the world will punish you even worse. The world doesn't love you. If the police get you, the police don't love you. When I beat you, I'm trying to save you. When they beat you, they're trying to kill you. All right, so this is chapter 16. Remember to make sure that you complete the questions for chapter 16 and turn it in to the substitute today. That's your assignment for the end of the day, and I will see everyone on Tuesday. Bye, guys.